Hey everybody, grace and peace to you, and welcome to part 2 of our study regarding chapter 13 of Mark's Gospel. In episode 1, Jesus had just left the building. That is to say, Jesus and his disciples had just left the second temple, Herod the Great's massive reconstructed fortress. Upon exiting the temple grounds, one of Jesus' disciples pointed out the immense opulence of the second temple structure, to which Jesus responded by predicting its demise. Subsequently, after a short walk to the Mount of Olives, Peter, James, John, and Andrew questioned Jesus about his shocking prediction. Jesus' words regarding the temple's destruction were unthinkable. After all, the temple was supposed to be invincible. And so for the disciples, the mere thought of its destruction was so incredible it could only lead them to think that Jesus had just predicted the end of the world. With this in mind, Jesus' response to his disciples' question initiates the longest block of uninterrupted teaching in Mark's Gospel. Furthermore, as we move forward in the text, it's essential to remember that Jesus' prophetic discourse will alternate between describing events in the foreground, that is, events that will happen in his disciples' lifetime, and events further out on the horizon. So now, if you will, grab your Bibles and let's get started. Mark chapter 13, verse 5. And Jesus began to say to them, "See that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray." In chapters 11 and 12, Jesus warned those who opposed him, those outside the kingdom. Now Jesus warns those on the inside. Jesus' disciples ask him for a sign, but in verse 5, he gives them a warning instead. In fact, this is the first of 4 warnings Jesus will throw down in chapter 13. The others come in verses 9, 23, and 33. In the face of the coming judgment, Jesus encourages his disciples to remain focused on his teachings and mindful of the path he set before them. Jesus is clearly concerned about his disciples becoming distracted and thus being led astray. Hence his warning is an appeal to remain focused and attentive, but it isn't a call into the business of forecasting. In light of this, it's essential to note, in the time leading up to the Second Temple's destruction, there were many messianic wannabes who misled the Jewish people and won their support with promises of redemption. However, instead of being saviors, these false messiahs only led the Jews into chaos and destruction. Hence, Jesus' warning not to be seduced from the path he provided. Moreover, I want to clarify that Jesus' assertion that many would come in his name, saying, "I am," doesn't mean that the messianic pretenders would actually claim to be Jesus, but that they would claim his role as Messiah for themselves. Let's go on to the next verse. Mark chapter 13, verse 7. "And when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. These are but the beginning of the birth pains." This Sunday, somewhere in America, whether it be in a megachurch, a small sanctuary, or a quaint study group, someone will make the claim that wars and rumors of wars, nation rising against nation, earthquakes, famines, and Donald Trump are proof that Jesus is coming back soon. But notice that's not what Jesus says. Quite the contrary. Again, Jesus' disciples are not to be misled or in a state of fear when they hear about these things. In fact, Jesus tells us These things are necessary, thus indicating they are only a part of God's eschatological plan, but not the end or even a sign that the end is near. Truth be told, the sinister and catastrophic events on Jesus' list here are common in every age of human history. And although these things are unfortunate, they are just a part of the human experience in a fallen world. Therefore, in verse 8, Jesus reiterates what he said in verse 7. Remember, the second temple and Jesus' prediction of its imminent doom is the subject. Thus, the beginning of birth pains indicates preliminary events that lead to catastrophe, like the rumors of Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire in AD 62, which subsequently led to the obliteration of the Second Temple and the ruin of Jerusalem in AD 70. In the Old Testament, birth pains are associated with divine judgment. Compare Jeremiah 4:31 and 6:24. With this in mind, the statements, the end is not yet, in verse 7, and the beginning of the birth pains in verse 8 run parallel, suggesting a process in God's eschatological plan. Hence, God's kingdom will be consummated in stages, and thus the unfortunate pain and suffering that characterize life in this age will persist between the interim periods. That is, between Christ's first and second coming. Naturally, it's easy to become distracted by events happening in real time right before our eyes. But rumor mongers and forecasters tend to make sinister and catastrophic events even worse. Undoubtedly, these are the kind of people Jesus warned his disciples about because they only create chaos, ambiguity, and the important point, they lead people astray. In closing, don't miss God's love for us behind Jesus' warning in our passage here today. There's no need to be alarmed. Despite wars and rumors of war, famine, earthquakes, sickness, and American politics, Jesus' warning is merely an encouragement to his disciples in every age of human history to remain focused on his teachings and mindful of the path he has set before us, whatever come what may. The point is to be vigilant and not distracted by events that unfortunately characterize life in a fallen world. Moreover, Jesus assures us that these calamities fall within the purview of God's eschatological purposes, and thus are in God's control. Again, no need to be alarmed. The message is, have faith in God. We have so much more to talk about, so please join me next time for the third part of our journey through Mark 13. Until then, may the Lord bless and keep you. Feel free to take part in the discussion in the comments section down below. And don't forget to like and share. And if you haven't done so, please consider subscribing. Thank you.